Parallel Lives. My name is Levi, and this is my co host, Dimmer.
Hello.
Today we have Pumpkin Queen, who is a horror narrator on YouTube. Today's episode is all about creativity, which is something that quite a lot of maladaptive daydreamers, have something to say about. So, yeah, this should be an interesting episode, seeing as, Pumpkin Queen, Dimmer, and myself are all sort of YouTubers. Created, we've made a lot of creative stuff as well. So, yeah, I don't know how we kind of want to jump into this. Demar, if you have like any questions or thoughts to start off with?
Yes, so there is this study. And I don't know, it's not crazy like groundbreaking or anything, but the study was I think it was called Empathy, Creativity and Emotion Regulation in like normal, immersive and maladaptive daydreaming. That's not the exact title, like don't quote me on that, but that's what the study was. And I'm pretty sure most of those words are in the actual title. And from my understanding, not that I'm a scientist or a researcher or understand how to interpret data, but from my understanding of what that study said was that of those three groups, maladaptive daydreamers are actually the least creative. Not because they don't come up with ideas, but because they don't translate them into real life. They don't take on that second aspect of creativity, which is creating. And I find that to be true. I know Levi just said just said like, "Oh, we're YouTubers, we're all creative." I don't feel like a creative person though because I don't feel like I translate things to the real world often, but is that something that I don't know, is that something you would say applies to you? Do you have trouble getting over that hump or do you feel like your maladaptive daydreaming actually helps you or like I don't know, just thoughts on that?
Good question. It is indeed very hard to translate daydreams into, the creative type of stuff. I see that a lot with I am very creative with, writing stories, and I also do art with drawing and everything. But translating it to from what I see in my mind back to on paper, that is indeed very difficult. So I can see why there would be a lot of people who wouldn't, because if you have it in your brain, it's more likely a movie from what we are experiencing. And if you were to bring it back out as a written form, like a book, that's a whole other thing. And in my opinion, it has been very hard getting that out. And I have spent a lot of time trying to put that out there and in the correct ways. Am I not over describing things that I see? Is it should I add more things, leave things away to the point where it's like, oh no, maybe it is too long. A little bit like that.
So my opinion on this is actually, I would say I'm a very creative person, but also, Dimmer, the way you explain creativity is quite interesting because I never thought about it that way. I never thought about, actually taking the stuff that you think about and creating something with it. For me, creativity was just something that was your ability to be able to think of original things or whatnot. And I realized like how sort of skewed, that is of me to have to think about it that way. But for me, it's kind of interesting because that made me realize that it's it's sort of difficult for me to create things in my mind out of nothing. Like I need to get inspiration or reference from something in the real world or from media or from something online or a video or something like that. music or whatnot, or something that I see on the street or something like that. Um, Otherwise, my brain is sort of blank, which is really strange, but I never really thought about it that way, but that's what I just realized. Maybe I'm creative in a way that I create as an artist, but without those things that sort of trigger like my daydreams, it's debatable. I feel like that makes, that's like my experience of it.
So that makes me think, Pumpkin Queen, like where do you get your inspiration from? Is your inspiration generated from within, from like your daydreams, or do you have to seek elsewhere for it?
Well, mainly for my stories, it is indeed my daydreams, and that goes back to, well, things that I use to daydream or stuff is more most likely music. That kind of fuel and that get the whole universe going, and I eventually, when I get like the base code, I kind of start picking from other media or to see inspiration, like other books, other stories. I'm like, oh, that is a fun idea. Here I can, take something from. So I indeed understand how that works. I am currently reading 1984, and that is also kind of becoming a little bit of inspiration for one of my current paracosms that I'm putting onto paper. So that is also a thing. Don't know if that's going to be a very positive outcome for the story, but it's fun. For my art, mostly just, yeah, whatever I come up with. That is mainly just my original characters that I try to put onto paper.
I'm wondering, have you like always been this way? Were you always artistic children, or was your like creative output something that came later in life because of your like inner world?
Well, MD has always been with me as a child, as far as I know. But the creative outputs, well, started to come more likely around my teenage years. Though I did start off with things like music, since I myself play an instrument. I play the harp.
A
That
harp?
eventually,
That's
yeah,
sorry, that's so cool. You don't meet many like harpists. I don't even know what to call
yeah.
them.
Um, but yeah, things like drawing and writing came more around my teenage years when I started experimenting and started to get art class at school and get to know, oh, wait, this is actually a lot of fun and I can actually do something with this, you know, and start to put things from your brain onto paper. And that was a whole new experience in some sort of weird way. And eventually even added cosplay onto it as well a couple of years later.
So, yeah, I've been creative since I can remember. I've always drawn things, and thinking about it, stories have like always been a pretty big deal for me. I've always been putting myself in stories, like in the universe of certain stories, becoming attached to characters and all that type of stuff. So, yeah, I've always been creative, and I think that, I always will be creative. It's just for me, it's just a personality thing. But yeah, it's kind of cool to, speak to maladaptive daydreamers who, well, I know, like, Dummer, you said that you're not creative, but I mean, you still run your YouTube channel and, create your video topics and things like that. So, speaking to maladaptive daydreamers who still create things, what I wanted to know, sorry, I know that my answer is sort of like branching off into a question, but it does have to do with it. So what I wanted to know is whether maladaptive daydreaming ever interferes with like that creativity that you have, that creative process of either, planning something, getting an idea for something, or even just making something like recording videos or editing videos or something like that.
It definitely interferes with mine. You said it. Halo has said it. I know I keep denying it that I'm creative because I do have like a lot of output, but that is passion, not creativity. Uh, and I guess the argument can be made for like what's the difference if you're passionate about something. But even on something like on my YouTube channel, even on this podcast, on most everything that I do that is output is filling a need. It's not really something I self-generated. It's something the community generated, something that they were asking us, or we draw on the community a lot for this podcast. We ask them like, what do you guys want to hear about next? Come up with some questions for us to ask the guests and things like that. So I really don't feel like I'm the one generating much of anything. So for me, that's why I don't feel like a creative person. But the output, the MD does make a big hump in like getting things out there. Like this podcast is the most stable upload schedule I have ever adhered to. But again, that's motivation, that's passion, but the motivation and the passion is for generating content for the community. The underlying passion isn't to create, it's to inform, I guess. So I don't know, like maybe like we sort of on the surface have like the same ends but completely different means, I guess.
Cool. And what about you, Pumpkin Queen?
Yeah. Yeah, so I hate doing the audio editing. So that is a very long process to do, especially because I tend to zone out a lot when I need to get to that point. Narration goes fine. I get the story, get it done, but the moment I need to edit is like, no, I don't feel like doing it, and I'm gone, and it's like 5 minutes of editing, gone again, put it on pause to save it, and it takes very long. So that's why I only do one video a week, because the process of making it is a lot longer than most narrators tend to have. Some people even have the ability to make one video a day, which I think is amazing, or multiple a week. I can't do that. It's the keeping the concentration at my work with the little boring parts of making it isn't not always working out too well. So that interferes a lot with my art. It goes well until I get like a new idea and I have to sit on it or think about showing others, and then I am gone for like a hot moment and I'm like, oh, I didn't exactly show it to that person. I daydreamed about showing that person and their reaction, but I didn't actually do it. Should I? Should I not? Or just continue? And then I just continue and I'll actually do it. Which a very stupid thing, because probably my friends would love to see it, but then I don't. So yeah, it does interfere. Some things take a lot longer than it should, especially when I am doing things like research or indeed editing. I tend to, fall away and use things as inspiration or start daydreaming about the topic, and I'm completely gone for like, if not half an hour, then longer. So that is very irritating.
Yeah, I feel like I can relate to a lot of what you said. And the thing is, with MD is that it's so like persistent. You know that you want to focus on your work and you know that you sort of have to focus on what you want to do, right? But like you said, after a few minutes, it's just you're absolutely gone. And for me, I'm an artist, and I can easily just sort of slip away into my daydreams while working, but at the end of the day, I still have to sit down and actually finish the work because it's easy to start and it's easy to sort of just like you know do some work for a few minutes, but actually getting it done like after 30 minutes to an hour, it starts to become difficult. So yeah, MD in terms of work, it's sort of a nightmare almost.
Yeah, I agree on that. I don't know if it becomes difficult for you on the work floor because I don't know what kind of work you do, but that is also very difficult, especially when there are people around you all the time and you have to like, I need to focus because people can't watch me do the things that I do
Yeah.
because otherwise they think I'm crazy for the things that I'm either going to blurt out by accident or stare at a dead point or maybe a person per accident, which has happened. And that is when you get by and they're just standing there like, what are you doing? Why are you staring at me? And like, oh, I'm so sorry.
I can imagine a job where you have to be in public and still deal with MD is so much more difficult to actually deal with because you you have to deal with MD on top of wanting to work, but you know that when you zone out, then like you said, maybe you're staring at someone or something like that. And that's like one of my biggest fears is just sort of zoning out in public and just having people just look at me like, dude, what are you doing? So yeah, no, I can imagine.
So we have the audience in here as well, popping things into the chat, and Rain, who's been a guest before. I can't remember on which one, but anyway, Rain had popped into the chat. Do you use creativity as a way to channel or regulate your MD? Why or why not? Um, and that's one I wanted to get to too, because yeah, do you use it as a way to sort of address maladaptive daydreaming, or is it just is a thing that you power through regardless of the MD, or do they just sort of coexist?
Good question. As for writing, it is a good way to get things out of the system. At least for me, it is. To actually put things on paper, have a point set behind it, like this is how it is, and we're not going to change it anymore. Because I don't know if that's a problem for you, but I tend to go back to certain scenes a lot for certain, universes or paracosms and do things over like, oh no, I like this better. No, write it down. This is how it is. This is how it's going to stay. And we're going to continue until we get to the end and maybe hope that we can close the book and put it on the shelf and hope that is where it's going to stay for a while. And that is actually what my goal was for this year, to get all of that out of my head because well, it kind of funny, Levi, because I saw that we both actually got into the pretty bad version of MD where we couldn't sleep. It was at least funny because it was around the same time. I even commented on the video about it. But around the time, I also ended up uploading a video with telling my viewers about it, what it was, and ended up telling my family members about it as well. They actually were, well, not all of them, the most people who are very close around me, who are very understanding about it. And yeah, at the moment I'm using writing to get things out of the system, which has been working really, really well. And art has been more of, well, a way to kind of coexist next to it, to help with it. I even made at some point a drawing about maladaptive daydreaming. You have seen it, Dimmer, didn't you?
Yeah, I bought it. I bought a sticker and a tank top.
Yeah, that was also a very fun project to do during that period. Also, to get more of a picture for other people who don't really understand what it is, with all of the parts of the drawing all having a bit of a more of a meaning, with the upper part of the head being a cage with, well, bit of a galaxy blur kind of thing in the middle, which represents the daydreams, hands reaching out for help, because that is what a lot of people want, but don't always tend to get. And roses and everything on top of it, because, well, I don't know if you have seen things on media or TikTok, because it tends to be very romanticized at the moment. So that's a little bit, which I put on my Teespring, so it's for everyone to get if it would be interested. I made it also as cheaply as possible, so. But yeah, it's a fun drawing I made, hoping that people would use it so we can kind of spot each other on the streets as well.
I don't even know how I would react to seeing, like, if somebody had just walked by me wearing like a Pumpkin Queen MD hoodie. like, I don't even know what I would do. Iris, okay, so we just, what was that last question we asked was do you use your MD to regulate what? No. Do you use your creativity to regulate maladaptive daydreaming? But while we were talking, Iris popped into the chat that they've actually had the opposite experience, that when you're like using, or when they're using creativity for like output, instead of just leaving it internal, what they actually end up doing is stimulating their MD, which I guess could lead someone into a spiral. Like, does that ever happen to you guys? Do you ever like get caught in this cycle of like your MD inspiring you to create something, but in the act of creating it, you are actually inspired to MD more?
For me, it's a definite yes. I have like, to get back to the original question as well, for me it is that way, but also it's more for me it's more related to what Iris said. And I noticed this when I started writing down my daydreams, just as a little experiment on how that affects, my art, my writing, all that type of stuff. And what ended up happening was that I wrote way, way, way more, and the story just kept going on and on and on. And yeah, it was just it was a pit that I pushed myself into by doing something like that. So if I start to draw my daydreams, for example, I think, it would just I just wouldn't end. It would just keep going on forever and ever. So yeah, like Iris said, it doesn't regulate it, it more so stimulates it. So, yeah.
Is that something you've ever experienced, Pumpkin Queen?
Yeah, I could understand it at some point. That's why I don't draw as much fan art as most people do, because I do tend to get very well attached to certain well, let's say video games and stuff. At the moment, that is well, maybe you've heard of it, Genshin Impact, and I am indeed also a little scared that if I start to make more fan art, especially if I were to create a character for it in that universe, that is only going to make it worse daydreaming from that video game with like a original character that I have created and stories that I'm going to make up, and basically just making up fan fictions and everything in my head to satisfy with everything. So yeah, I haven't gotten to that on purpose. Not a single piece of fan art from that game, just because I'm a little scared that I'm going to spiral down. So I'm usually tend to keep it on my own characters and try to get that out of the system and do the things that I need to, and not get too attached to other media forms, even though I do love them.
So I can actually really relate to what you said there with, creating your own character for this world and for this fandom or, media or whatnot. I can definitely back you up in saying that, creating a character and engaging in media in some way, in some creative way, such as creating your own character or daydreaming of yourself engaging with the characters or whatnot, that does definitely create that spiral effect where it's just, this is something new that's interesting. And when it happened to me, I'm extremely heavily currently into a game called Rhythm Doctor, and as soon as I created my character, it was just over. So, engaging in media with creativity is a very fine line, in my opinion, and to what I can agree with, to what you said, between allowing yourself to sort of just spiral out of control and just indulge in this new form of media or new world or whatever, versus whether you have other things to focus on, So yeah, no, I definitely understand the pain.
We had another question in the chat that speaking of characters, does MD help you make characters? I have found that it does not. So I used to be pretty creative. I swear to God, I used to be. I used to write. I don't anymore, but I used to. And what I made was an anthology of short stories about the life of this little like single dad family, which is nothing to do with my paracosm. It has nothing to do with MD. But what I noticed I was doing was all of the characters were from my MD. Like I just took them and gave them a new skin and a new backstory and used them to populate the short stories. They weren't the same characters, but like they were the same characters. You know what I mean? But I used the personalities and stuff that I had built there and transported them to something else to use. But I don't think that I could just sit down and generate a character for a story. I don't think I was ever able to do that. So the MD helps me look like I'm creating characters, but I'm not actually. What about you guys?
For me, when I am creating characters, I usually tend to make them a little too complex, if that makes any sense. So, as far as writing out the character, I start with a nice base, and it was good what it is, and then I spend too much time on it, and it actually is like, oh, well, it could have been a little bit less, actually. This is going to take a while if I need to explain this to another person eventually in the future. This is a mess. And that is a little bit of a problem that I start adding too much of this is interesting, that is interesting, I could do that. Let add some little bit of mental illness into it because that is very relatable. This piece of media that is cool, and then it becomes a little bit too much. You don't really have like a nice formed character, but it's like a really big background story with too much added to it, and it's going to take too long to actually explain what this character is and how he works, or how she it works. So I don't really copy paste all that much, unless it's with my the character that I represent, because it's still me in every universe, in my stories. Then yes, then I do get it. Though with characters that are around it, I usually tend to build them a lot more than the actual character that I am, playing.
It's kind of interesting because, I feel like I I feel like my answer is so it's similar but also so different to both of what Pumpkin Queen and Dimmer said. But for me, it doesn't help. It doesn't help a lot. Like I can easily make up a character on the spot, but because it's maladaptive daydreaming, I feel like the characters have to be a bit more detailed and a bit more fleshed out, and they have to have a reason for being part of my daydreams. Like I can't just make a character on the spot for the sake of for the sake of making a character for my daydreams just cuz. Um, so MD doesn't really help me with that just because there's too much detail that needs to go into it. But I feel that maladaptive daydreaming definitely does help in the process of sort of thinking of original ways or original personality traits and things to give to characters. So I can easily make up a quick scenario in my head, uh, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I guess it depends as well. But yeah, it's sort of, but also not, if that makes sense. But yeah, I mean, I think that we all actually, all of us here, we write. So in terms of writing, does maladaptive daydreaming ever sort of, uh, how can I phrase this? Would you say that maladaptive daydreaming makes it easier to get thoughts on paper, to get thoughts out there? Or would that also be sort of more of an interference? So, yes, we do know that MD might help us creatively or might make us, think of scenarios, but is it really easy for us to bring our own thoughts down onto paper and actually make something with that? Or does MD interfere with that as well for you guys? Sorry, I know my my way of asking questions is a bit dragged out and long.
A little. Don't
Sorry about
worry
that.
about it. No, don't worry about it. It was just being sarcastic. Um Yeah, well, like I said somewhere in the beginning, it's very hard to translate something that you can see in your daydreams, because we know what a character looks like. We know what a room looks like when we're standing in it, or what happens. But having to translate that into a story from something that is more likely a movie onto a book kind of thing, that is different, because you have to explain things that the characters do, things that the characters the sounds that maybe come off, what things look like, little details, so you can paint the picture that you are seeing and not let everything out, but also not make it too detailed to clutter the whole page and make your readers bored with, okay, we get it, you don't need to keep telling us how the clock on the wall looks like. Those kind of things. Keep it interesting, but not do too much with it. And that is hard. At least what I think. Because whenever I'm writing it, I need to have other people look at it like, is this good? Do I have to cut out things? Do I have to do things extra before actually narrating it onto my channel before it's good enough?
I have a lot of trouble with translation, and it actually has impacted my life like negatively in very real ways because oh my god, I don't want to take an hour to like tell you my life story, but let me try to get it down in a few sentences. So, I have always daydreamed in the same paracosm. I don't have a lot of different ones. I don't go from theme to theme. It is like an ever renewing or super long movie. You know, it's a movie that's 30 years long instead of 2 hours. 30 years. So there's a lot. There's a lot of backstories. There's a lot of characters who have years of backstory. There's a lot of different plot threads. Some of them, you know, that build to the main plot, and some of them that just sort of die out. And because the beginning of the story you know, it's so integral to the story, it's the foundation, but I made it when I was friggin' 5. So there's a lot of things that don't you know, translate well into an adult work. There's a lot of weird, you know, like universe rules that I don't think would make sense in a written story, but it makes sense in my daydream because, you know, that's continuous, but those rules were made when I was a child, so they don't really make sense, you know? So anyway, because I've always had this super huge, ongoing, internal, very vivid world, I always felt the need or the want, I guess, to bring it out of me, to make it somehow tangible in writing. Was mostly the one when I was younger. And how that's impacted my life is when I went to university, I started taking writing courses, and they didn't really have anything to do with my major. I was passionate about something else, something that I wanted, you know, to do with my life as a career, had nothing to do with writing. But anyway, I took all these writing courses, and I'm American. University is friggin' expensive. And now I have all this debt that I didn't need to take on for courses in something that I never really had any intention of using in my career. It was just sort of a side thing that I found out, you know, through years of trial and error that I don't care about. Like, I only cared about writing in that I could translate my MD into something tangible. I'm not actually a writer. I'm not passionate about writing. I don't care about writing. It's not something that I want to do. And it took me way too long and way too much money to figure out that I didn't want to do that. I didn't have to do that. Yeah, I don't know, just way too much time and money to figure out that I am not passionate enough about writing to put in the work and the resources and the finances that it would take to be good enough to write these daydreams. Like, to write a 30-year-old paracosm in a way that anyone would want to read, like I gotta get to like J.R. Tolkien level, you know? And I'm not willing to do that. I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah, I feel like I can definitely relate to that as well because, you know, I really want to write down my paracosm thoughts and I really want to create things of the daydreams that I have, but it's so difficult. It is like, like you mentioned, Deb, you know, having to write down these thoughts. It spirals out of control, and you know, it becomes this whole thing where you'd end up writing a novel with all these thoughts that we have in our minds and things like that. I do create like 4-panel comics, but I never finish them. They are drawn so roughly and they're just like quick sketches. And that is just to get my thoughts recorded somehow. just because I always think like I wish that you could have like a video recorder for your mind where it could just record your daydreams or your thoughts so that you don't have to worry about forgetting them or anything like that. But yeah, it's so difficult for me to put my thoughts onto paper. Like I can do it, but if I start, then I just don't stop, and then it turns into a novel, and it's just bad because it's just random ramblings, that just pop up. So yeah.
I wanted to bring it back around to something that you said in the beginning, because I made a note of it, but then we talked about other things, and I didn't find a good way to segue into it. So now I'm just going to shoehorn it in here. So in the beginning I had asked something like, what did I ask you? Oh, are you creative because of your MD, or does your MD make you creative? I had asked something like that, and you had answered, Pumpkin Queen, that, well, I've had MD since I was a child. And that opens up like a whole new line of questions, because I totally get that. Like it's not something you can't really separate out exactly where this begins and that ends, and it's all wrapped up in each other. But so I see people say, and it hurts my soul to see people say that they know that the MD is hurting them, but they are afraid to, and they don't want to attempt to treat it. They don't want to try to make themselves better. They don't want to try to curb it in any way, specifically because they feel that it makes them really creative. It's what generates all their ideas for art or writing or whatever they're into. And they are afraid that if they get treated for maladaptive daydreaming, they will lose that part of themselves. Do you guys
Oh
have thoughts on
no.
that?
Oh no, I don't think your creativity is going to leave you if you get yourself treated. I mean, I would be more than happy if it could go back from maladaptive to immersive daydreaming. But no, I don't think your creativity is just going to plop out of your head and just, leave it somewhere in a dumpster. I don't think it works like that. No, people don't have to be afraid of that. I wish we could get more ways to treat it actually, and it's not that part is going to leave you of having the ability to put things on paper or being able to draw, because you can still, if you were able to write or draw or maybe do other things with it, like what I mentioned earlier, cosplay, translated into other things. It's not like you won't be able to enjoy that hobby anymore or become suddenly bad at it. You will still have that, and I don't think that your creativity is going to leave you. Of course, we all get an art block. I think we can all relate to that from time to time, that we just sit there, look at the paper, and just don't know what to do with it, or everything that comes out is bad. But that doesn't mean you can't do it anymore, or that you're not creative anymore. There are always ways to, do the thing that you love, because it is always a hobby, at least for me. And at the moment, it is a way to indeed get things out of my system for my MD, but I don't think it will leave me when I would eventually get myself treated for it, because I hope that in the future that would become more of a thing.
So, in my opinion, I 100% agree with what you said, and I disagree that, you know, getting maladaptive daydreaming treated, of course, will affect creativity and stuff like that. Like the way that I think about it is not having maladaptive daydreaming you'll still be creative. You'll still think of all these scenarios, and the difference will just be that you'll be able to get stuff done in the real world. You'll be able to do chores, work, focus on studying. You'll be able to do other things. That is, obviously considering that there's no other thing that's sort of interfering with those things as well. I'm just speaking of the maladaptive aspect of maladaptive daydreaming here. So yeah, like having immersive daydreaming would be absolutely fantastic. It's just the maladaptive daydreaming part. The daydreaming is fine. It's okay to have. But the reason why it's maladaptive daydreaming is because it causes distress, it interferes with our daily lives. So not having that maladaptive part of daydreaming would be absolutely amazing, and I don't think it would affect creativity or having characters or anything. It's not those characters and those worlds belong to you. Your characters and your paracosm, it's part of you. It doesn't belong to your maladaptive daydreaming. It belongs to you as a person. So, it's not like if you get your maladaptive daydreaming treated, that your daydreams are going to get treated as well. It's not like that. It's just that you'll be able to get stuff done in the real world. So, yeah.
Okay, I have a completely random thought. Just a straight thought. Characters. Okay. I noticed Pumpkin Queen that you are
Yeah.
called Pumpkin Queen, and your little icon is a queen of the pumpkins, I guess.
Yeah.
And Levi too. Because as YouTubers, but in other things, there's sort of pen names, online personas. I don't have much of an online persona. I mean, a little bit. I'm a lot nicer on my YouTube channel than I am in real life. But for you guys, I don't know. Is your online persona like a daydream character, like an idolized self or anything like that?
Oh, yeah. So, fun thing, I actually did not create her just to be a part of my daydreams in the first place. I just needed something to be the face of my YouTube channel, because most horror narrators tend to, well, have a mask on, because most of us are masked. We don't show our face, and I chose for that to be a pumpkin head. That is more likely a bit of a species kind of thing. You don't see it around a lot anymore. But I thought it was really cool to have more like a monster type of character, because it's in the horror community, so it was fitting. And I'm a very big fan of The Nightmares Before Christmas, so that ended becoming Pumpkin Queen. But eventually, to get more into the community and the fandom from the creepypastas and everything, I started doing role plays and everything, and having to write out things for my character. And that is the point where Pumpkin Queen became a parami. And you know what? She's welcome. I don't mind it at all. I do have my own little kind of cozy place for her, and most of the other people that I would interact with as her are like characters from Friends or other media within the genre. And it's just enjoyable and fun. And Pumpkin Queen is a little bit less like myself, because she's a lot more confident and more like a leader type of person, which I am not. I'm very to myself and very big introvert. So I find it to be very scary to talk to others and new people. So yeah, Pumpkin Queen is most likely indeed a better version of myself, or an idolized version. Yeah.
So my avatar it is my idealized self from my daydreams. This character that I have as my avatar, basically Yeah, it's basically what my character looks like in my mind. And you know, but it's actually interesting because I don't act the way that this character does. I still act like myself. But when I draw my character doing anything, then they are their idealized self, you know? It's very strange, but yeah, I do I do use my maladaptive daydreaming version of myself.
Sort of in that same vein. So, oh my gosh, let me think of a way to put this. I just like gave you my whole backstory of like how it took me far too long and far too many resources just to figure out that I wasn't creative in that way. But so I mean, I guess I'm coming from that perspective, and you two as actual artists are like coming from a different perspective. Would you guys encourage creativity as a way for MDers to address their maladaptive daydreaming, as a way to get it under control?
Hmm. That that's a good one. At least for me, it works. But I believe, well, every person is different. It probably also works different for every different person. For me, in what I already said, it works really well to get things out of my system through writing. But on the other hand, for drawing, it can spiral me back down if it comes down to things like fan art and other things. So I think it needs a little bit of experimenting for everyone and see what works. Again, for me, writing works really well to get things out of paper, get a point behind it, and to try and close the book that you've been working on for all those years in your brain and hope that somewhere along the point it ends.
What about you, Levi? Would you encourage it? Let's say you were sitting in a room of 100 MDers, giving them advice for how to get a hold of their maladaptive daydreaming. So, to a general population of different kinds of MDers, would channeling their MD into a creative outlet be on your list of things to tell them to do?
Um, you know, it's quite a difficult question because I feel like, like Pumpkin Queen said, each person is different, you know, but I think that for those who can do it, sure, they can go ahead. But I feel that uh, I personally feel that people shouldn't force themselves to have a specific type of outlet if it doesn't work for them. Test things out, see what works, what doesn't. Yeah, just take it from there. And I'll just basically like say that my answer is it's a difficult question because each person is different, and what works for one person might not work for the other. So yeah.
Kind of getting to the end of the episode here. So to wrap things up, for people who do have that creative spark, for people who do also have a passion for the arts, what tips would you give to them, or any advice that you would give to them about using their creativity as like as something to regulate their MD, or just in general about any advice on being able to set aside your daydreams to actually be able to be productive in the way that they want to be?
If something is really, messing up your day with, your MD, so you can't work on everything and get distracted by it a lot, like I said, try and get it out of your system. If it is art, you can make drawings of it, maybe comics. For writing, try to write it out, even if it's really short. Everything that you think could help, try and do it. Not literally on the spot, but try and plan times to actually get to that and get it out. I myself try to do that as well. to do that mainly during the weekends or during the evening periods to kind of get things out so I won't have to worry about it the next day. Or maybe write things down, small things in a little booklet, and carry that around. Maybe that can also help so you won't have to think about it for the rest of the day and get back to it later at another point. Try and find different ways, see if they can help. And yeah, a little bit like that.
I 1000% agree with that little booklet tip. At the height of my productivity and output, that's exactly what I had. I had on hand at all times a beat up, crappy little dollar store notebook that I just jotted down anything that popped into my head. God, I wish I could find that. It's got to be around this house somewhere, just full of all kinds of crazy stuff. Oh man, I would love to see that. I gotta like comb through my basement and find that.
Oh, actually, I agree with that as well. What I could also suggest for anyone who might be in front of their computers a lot is to just, if you're on Discord, just create your own server with just you and just have like a channel for each thing, like I have my own server, just random thoughts, one for work in progress, for ideas, all that type of stuff. And you'll find that it helps a lot just to keep things neat, And if you remember something that you need to find, you can just do a quick search and there you have it. So also good for videos and audio and pictures and stuff. So yeah.
I agree with that. I also have a server with just myself in it where I pop random things into it, whether that's for indeed art ideas, like putting references in there, just a whole clutter for one like little thingy, but also indeed like ideas for stories, thumbnails, all kinds of stuff. So yeah, that does indeed help a lot.
Yeah.
You know what I just realized? It's September right now. We're recording this in September, but this episode is actually going to air on October 1st. And
Oh,
it's like,
nice.
yeah, it's going to be Halloween and we've got the Pumpkin Queen on as a guest.
Oh.
Nice.
I just noticed. Just in time for the outro. Oh man, missed opportunity. We should have done something with that. Oh well.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Parallel Lives. We will have all of Pumpkin Queen's links down in the description. Like, subscribe, follow, comment if it's an option on whatever platform you're listening on. Like I said, this episode is going out on October 1st, and the next one will be out on October 16th. And that will be our final episode for season 1. We're going to be sitting down with a therapist who also has maladaptive daydreaming and is offering her perspective on that. So yeah, definitely come by for the season finale. We will see you then, I guess. Thanks for coming, Pumpkin Queen.
Thank you. Have a wonderful spooky season, everyone.